If you've ever looked at the world stage and wondered, why on earth do nations constantly seem to act against their own best economic interests? Or maybe, why do even the most radical revolutions eventually just settle down into traditional diplomacy? Well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, in this explainer, we're looking way past the daily headlines to uncover the invisible architectural blueprint of global politics. We're diving into Kenneth Waltz's absolutely groundbreaking theory of structural realism.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, anarchy versus hierarchy. Then move to 2, the limits of cooperation. After that, it's 3, structures dictate strategies. And we'll wrap up with 4, the balance of power.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, anarchy versus hierarchy, where we're going to challenge some major assumptions.
We so often assume the global stage is just this inherent state of war, right? A chaotic arena where violence is literally always just around the corner. But we really have to ask ourselves, is life inside a country actually any safer? Is it really true that the threat of violence is the main thing that separates international affairs from national affairs?
Think about these staggering historical realities for a second. Domestic politics can be just as bloody, if not more so, than international conflicts. The Taiping Rebellion in China cost up to 20 million lives. The American Civil War saw 600,000 perish. Millions upon millions were eliminated in Stalin's purges, and Hitler's extermination camps murdered 6 million Jews. These horrific, massive-scale events didn't happen between warring states. They happened entirely within borders. So if both domestic and international realms are completely saturated with the potential for massive violence, well, violence itself just cannot be the defining difference between them.
So, what is the difference? The defining difference isn't violence, it's structure. Domestic politics is a hierarchy with a monopoly on force. International politics, on the other hand, is an anarchic self-help system. Think about it like this. When you're at home, if someone threatens you, you call the police, right? The government holds the legitimate right to use force. And because of that safety net, citizens and businesses can specialize, they can trade and become deeply intertwined. But globally, there is literally no World 911 to call. It's an unorganized, completely decentralized realm. And this is exactly what Waltz means by anarchy. He doesn't mean chaos. He simply means the absolute absence of a central governing authority. Moving right along, let's hit section 2, the limits of cooperation, or, as I like to think of it, the economics of survival. Because of this global anarchy we just talked about, the absolute guiding principle of action becomes self-help. A state's mandatory number 1 imperative is to take care of itself. Why? Because there is quite literally nobody else coming to save them. If a state doesn't prioritize its own survival above everything else, it seriously risks ceasing to exist altogether. And this brilliant insight by Kenneth Waltz perfectly explains why states simply do not act like rational economic firms striving for maximum profit. Think about it. A company just wants to get richer. If they take a bad risk, well, they might go bankrupt. But if a nation takes a bad risk, it might be conquered or entirely destroyed. Because the stakes are literally existential, economic logic is always overpowered by political and security logic. This means that even if cooperation offers huge, undeniable gains for everyone involved, states will still avoid it out of this deep-seated fear of vulnerability and dependency. Waltz points out 2 massive structural barriers here. First off, nations are terrified that if they cooperate, the other guy might get slightly more out of the deal. And second, they are totally terrified of becoming so specialized that they end up relying on another country for critical goods, like food, technology, or energy. When faced with a cooperative deal, a nation basically has to ask itself, sure, will both of us gain? Probably. But who is going to gain more? Let's say country A and country B trade. A's economy grows by 5%, but B's grows by 15%. Country A isn't sitting there happy about its 5% gain. No way. A is terrified that B is going to use that extra 10% to build a bigger military and attack them tomorrow. In an anarchy, your relative strength compared to your neighbor is vastly more important than your absolute wealth. Okay, let's dive into section 3, structures dictate strategies, and the fascinating concept of the tyranny of small decisions. There's a step-by-step analogy of a bank run that perfectly demonstrates how perfectly rational individual choices can lead to terrible collective outcomes. If you hear your bank might fail, the smartest, most prudent thing you can possibly do is run down there and grab your money. But if everybody does what is individually smart, what happens? The bank crashes and everyone loses. The structure of the situation forces a disastrous result regardless of anyone's good intentions. The economist Alfred E. Kahn famously called this the tyranny of small decisions. People don't sit down in a room and vote to destroy a passenger railway service. But by each individual making the tiny, small decision to just drive their car for convenience, the railway eventually goes bankrupt. The macro-level outcome is something literally nobody wanted, but those structural constraints completely override individual intentions. And bringing this back to global politics, because there's no global agency to enforce solutions, states are trapped in a system where nobody can afford to prioritize the needs of the global ecosystem over their own immediate security. We face massive, world-shaking problems today, like nuclear proliferation or environmental collapse, that absolutely require a macro-level, unified global solution. But the system structure forces every single nation to act on a micro level. Just like the people rushing that bank, states have to do what's necessary for their own immediate preservation. And that makes rational action for the sake of the whole system practically impossible.
Let's move to our final section, number 4, the balance of power and how states actually adapt to this anarchy. All of this brings us to a really counterintuitive truth about international politics. States naturally balance against strong powers rather than bandwagoning with them. Now, in a domestic political election, if one candidate is clearly winning, everyone jumps on the bandwagon to get a piece of the victory, right? But internationally, bandwagoning is a death sentence. If you help a massively powerful state conquer everything else, what is stopping them from turning around and conquering you next? Absolutely nothing.
So, to maximize their own safety, secondary states will inevitably flock to the weaker side, because it is the stronger side that inherently threatens them. As Waltz points out, even ancient historians like Thucydides noticed this thousands of years ago. Weaker city-states didn't love Sparta because it was morally better. They allied with Sparta simply because Athens had grown too strong and terrifying. The goal isn't to maximize power for its own sake, but to maximize security. Balancing is just the natural, inevitable byproduct of a self-help system. The competitive pressure of this anarchic system is so absolute that it forces even the most radical revolutionaries to conform. A great example: when the Bolsheviks took power in Russia, Leon Trotsky actually said his foreign policy would be to issue some revolutionary pamphlets and then basically close up the joint. He literally thought they could just ignore global politics entirely, but within just a few years, the brutal pressures of international competition completely socialized them. Lenin ended up telling his diplomats to put on suits, avoid revolutionary rhetoric, and make practical deals, even with their ideological enemies in Germany. The structure simply forces conformity. So this leaves us with a profound geopolitical paradox to wrap up our explainer today. If the very structure of the international system forces states to prioritize their own survival above all else, ensuring that they constantly balance against power and fiercely guard their independence, who looks out for the whole world? Waltz doesn't offer a cozy utopian answer, but he does give us an incredibly clear, unsentimental lens to see the hidden rules of the game. So what does this all mean for the future of global cooperation? Keep questioning the structures around you.